To kind of dial back, it's like when we're talking about tracking your macros, we're specifically looking at measuring how much protein, carb, and fat you're eating in a day, which indirectly, obviously, we're paying attention to how many calories we eat in a day. That also opens up freedom to be tracking other things like keeping tabs on your fiber. Alex and I both love Chronometer, and I'm laughing because I still don't know if it's Chronometer or Chronometer. But we're definitely high key fans. And the reason for Chronometer is that you don't have to pay for the barcode scanner. I don't know if MyFitnessPal is still doing that or if they got canceled.
I don't know. Maybe they got canceled for that. I don't know.
But I will say, it's like, I just feel like
be hard these days. Inflation, man. Got to raise the price on that barcode scanner.
Side note, I have seen so many funny memes about eggs, specifically with, I don't know what I scrolled past last night, but it was like the Narcos theme song. And then it was like a husband and wife in the kitchen. And obviously they're like all, like dressed up and whatever. But like, I don't even think it had, like voiceover, nothing. It literally just said a caption that says like, when you decide to capitalize like on the egg shortage or something. It's like, yo, I'm funny at times, but like, I'm not funny like that. Like y'all are doing the Lord's work and we appreciate it. Right. But yeah, it's like with Chronometer, especially if you happen to be a nutrition coach, and this is actually something that Alex can probably talk on more. Chronometer has a lot of really cool features if you happen to be a nutrition coach that's working with other people, because I believe you can actually make it so your clients can't see.
Yeah, you can turn off. Totals. You can turn off all the nutrition information. So if you just want them to like track their food, and I like to use it for people who get really caught up in the numbers, right? But it's still helpful to have awareness and track food.
Totally. And I will say, one of the biggest questions we always get about like food tracking apps is, it's like, do I need to pay for this special? I think Chronometers is called like gold. The biggest thing you're going to deal with is, do you mind that sometimes ads are going to be playing when you're trying to enter your stuff? But I would say my favorite thing about Chronometer is that you can just set no goals. So like you can track your food, you can log everything that you're eating. But again, it's like there's some times where people get really caught up on like, oh, I'm aiming for 130 grams of protein and, trying to get as close as possible and stuff. And it's like, we also don't need to do that. But, for today's purposes of the podcast, we actually specifically want to talk about kind of a newer approach to tracking your macros that doesn't encompass basically worrying about the goals of tracking protein and carbs and fats, but rather just actually focusing on two goals. So, Alex, with flexible tracking, what are we looking at?
So basically, we're just trying to control for calories and protein. Because if we're talking about, and we call it flexible tracking because traditionally macro tracking is based on, you have a target for protein, you have a target for carbohydrates, and you have a target for fats, right? And this is how I learned how to track macros. Like I think you did too, Laurie. Like we all started from like tracking all three. And like, you got to be within 5 grams on the carbs and protein, and then 2 grams.
Who made these rules? First of all,
I don't know, man. I don't know who made the rules.
I have 2 questions. Who made these rules about like, oh, we have to be in these tiny ass parameters? But also like who, because I think the thing is, it's like, you also don't know what you don't know. And so back in the day, we just didn't have as much research. Like I feel like the industry was still swinging so hard between like, is it best to eat low carb? Is it best to eat low fat? And so it was like, there was just such this divide, but like research hadn't quite gotten there. But then like fast forward for our listeners, if you're not following, highly recommend. Alan Aragon's a good friend of mine. He released the book actually called Flexible Dieting. but he is incredible. And so with his book, it's like, I wish that the book he had published this past year had been available, 5, 10, 15 years ago, because he comes in with, hey, here's what science says, and here's what we know to be true at this exact moment in time. So, kind of here's a good, groundwork for general guidelines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so with that, he deep dives in that book talking about like, hey, having specific goals for exactly how many carbs to eat in a day or exactly how much fat to eat in a day. Actually, it's like it just depends. And so what it really comes down to is, well, what are your personal preferences? Because for a lot of people, and again, this goes both ways, for so many people, it's like, I love eating high fat. I love, eating tons of nut butter and bacon and kind of more like paleo, if you will. And then other people, it's like, nope, I don't really like fatty meats. I'm not really into oils, or for a lot of people, it's like a weird texture thing, which is interesting. But, for some people, it's like, nope, I really just want to eat tons of protein and tons of carbs and like screw the fats, right? And so I think that's the cool thing is it's like, we now know, fast forward to present day, it's like, well, shoot, we don't need to worry about those as much, with the asterisk that for sure, it's like we do need certain amounts of fats and we do need certain amounts of carbs if we love being active, for our hormone health and stuff like that. But there's just, it's like, I remember like people wanting to do consults for nutrition back in the day where it'd be like, just tell me, the perfect macro split. And it's like,
there's it doesn't exist for every single person. It doesn't even exist for the same within the same person, because it depends, it changes. And that's the thing, the essence really of like, I think flexible tracking, because again, we can have variation between, like, and for me, even from day to day, like, maybe I want to crush some carbs or more carbs because my body is like, man, I need carbs. I did like 10 rounds of jujitsu and I'm like, I need the carbs. But maybe the next day I'm like, you know what? I don't want that. I really want more fat. So like when we were tracking previously, within like rigid, and the whole purpose of doing that, right, was just to be precise, because we wanted to have consistency. And that's really the essence of like tracking your food. Like people, I think, really get hung up on like like accuracy versus precision. Whereas like accuracy is like, we don't know if anybody tells you like, this is how many calories that you need, or this is exactly how many calories you're eating. That's bullshit, because we don't know. We can't measure that. Like, what we can look at is how precise you are being, how consistent you are being over time. Like, and that's the essence of like having these 3 targets, right? Because if you have 3 targets and you are spot on all those 3 targets, then we know for sure you are, in essence, eating pretty much the same every day, right? There's not any variation, because that's a small box that you have to maintain yourself in. And I know that comes from like, macro track is not new. Like, it comes like bodybuilders and stuff like that were doing it forever. And that was because they needed to have that level of precision to reach the high amounts of goals that they were getting. Like, to get to that level of body fat, low level body fat, you got to have a lot of control and management over what you're eating, right? But the average person doesn't really need that kind of precision. Like, if you're a person that just wants to, look a little bit better in a 2-piece, like, or a swimsuit on the beach, whatever, like, you don't need that level of precision. And arguably, it's not even sustainable to have that level of precision, right? So, with flexible tracking, we're really looking only at 2 key targets, which are going to be calories, which is going to determine whether or not we are in an energy deficit or an energy surplus or at energy balance. So we're either losing body fat, we're either in a deficit, we're either maintaining our body mass levels, or we're in a surplus and gaining body mass, right? And then protein, which is probably arguably the most important macronutrient, because it's going to determine whether or not we build or maintain muscle. It's going to help with our satiety. There's a whole host of benefits that protein has. So that's probably the most important one. And carbs and fats really just can fall where they fall, because, again, they're not really necessary to tightly control those. And then arguably all diets that are effective, at least like fat loss and health, are pretty high in protein. They control for calories, and then carbs and fats can kind of just vary. Like, we have keto, which is high fat, low carb, and we have a plant-based diet, which is high carb and maybe moderate fat, right? It depends on how you do it. But that's where the variation is. And that's where ultimately like we will find the happy place for you as an individual, because you're just going to eat how you prefer.